What's up, guys? This is James from the Timur podcast, and today I've got another video for us on the showcasing the different factions from the Tsardoms 1448 Fall of Constantinople mod for the game Medieval to Total War. So today I have the Kingdom of Bosnia, as was requested by one of our viewers. So thank you for that recommendation. And yeah, let's take a look at the Bosnians. So with Bosnia, you start with 5 settlements. You are Catholic, although I would say there is an asterisk next to that. We'll talk about more of that later. Your allies are the Hungarians, but they are technically your suzerain. So the last 100 years for the Bosnians has been difficult, to say the least. In the late 1300s, I'll just scroll through the history in case you want to read. But the short version is the late 1300s was somewhat of a golden age for the Bosnians. With great leadership, they were able to expand their empire quite a bit, taking both Serbian lands, Croatian lands, and lands directly on the Adriatic coast, which gave some nice trade bonuses. And they were able to fight off Serbian invasions, Ottoman invasions, and they were able to be mostly independent from the Hungarians, who oftentimes were making the Bosnians their servants. So that lasted for a while, but eventually started to disintegrate. And in the last 50 years or so, leading up to 1448, Bosnia has lost land. They are still united, yes, but have quite a few threats on their borders, including the Serbians, of course, who you are at war with. And then it doesn't say this, but I'm pretty sure you're also at war with the Ottomans. So you don't start directly next to the Ottomans. They do have a few a few settlements to get through to you, but you are their enemies. And the other problem with Serbia is, yes, you lost a lot of land, you're surrounded by enemies, and you really have to be careful with the Hungarians, because although they are your allies, they don't have any loyalty to you necessarily. They would be more than happy to take your land, so you got to watch out for that. And as far as your religion, you very recently abandoned a Christian heretical belief. It's called like Christiani or something like that. We'll take a look on the campaign map. But it was a heretical religion which put you at odds with both the Orthodox Christians to the east and the Catholic Christians to your north and west. Now, you have recently accepted Catholicism because you need the help of the Catholics, but there is still heresy in your lands and in your people. So we'll look more at that in a minute. As far as winning conditions, you need to hold 35 regions, including all of these, which, as you can imagine, are all around Bosnia, some in Serbia, and some along the Adriatic coast. And for a short campaign, you only need 15 regions, but you have to eliminate the Serbians. The Serbians are probably your biggest, well, not your biggest enemy, but I mean your most traditional enemies. And then, of course, the Ottomans are right behind them. So we'll talk about the likely enemies and allies of Serbia, or of Bosnia, there we go, in a minute. But if we look at their strength, it says good Western-style roster, access to allied local populations. Yep, that's all. That's pretty accurate. Weaknesses, lack of unit variety. I don't actually necessarily agree with that, but limited heavy infantry, that's true, and exposed position, that is definitely true. Bosnia is kind of a difficult portion of the map to be in, and we'll see more of that in a minute. As far as special units, one of the units showcased here is the Bosnian Royal Guard. We'll see them in the later half of this video, but definitely an excellent, superb unit there. So with that, let's hop on over into the campaign map. Alright, so here we are on the campaign map, and as you'll see, there is another nice little welcome here with some historical information, so I will scroll through this pretty quickly, blah blah blah. Okay, and yes, where was it? Well, anyway, it is a difficult time in Bosnia. Did I say Serbia earlier? If I said Serbia, I'm sorry, I meant Bosnia. Okay, so here is the campaign map, and as you will see, here in the heart of Bosnia, you have 4 settlements, and then down to the south, you have a 5th down here on the Adriatic. So the nice thing is your regions, other than this one down here, are pretty centrally located, so you can get relief armies and reinforcements to each other pretty quickly. But there are some pretty big issues here. So, well, first of all, let's just go through your different settlements. So over here in your capital city of Bobovac, you have a pretty decent half-stack army. So some good infantry, some handgunners, and some crossbowmen, as well as some excellent noble cavalry. And what's really nice about the Bosnians, and we'll talk about this later, is you have access to a lot of different types of troops, I would say. And I'll talk more about this, but I mean, right off the bat, you can train so many different units just immediately. So some of them, yeah, do take longer than others, but you can build up an army really fast. And that's actually the case with most of your settlements once you build the necessary barracks. So very nice. You got a few forts scattered around over here, and they're not actually forts. They represent minor settlements, but on the battle map, they are forts. And then one over here on your western territory, one down here, kind of in the mountains, and then one all the way down here, the southern tip of your empire. To the north, you have 2 smaller castles with some, well, in this one, you have some militia tier units, and then over here, you have like early professional spearmen and medium archers. We'll take a look at them later on the battle map. Over here, you have a nice general, and then over here, some other units in your city. So some basemen. I combined the 2 words. I'm sorry, I'm recording this right after my Milanese video, and because I don't know when I will next have time to do this, so I'm trying to do as much as possible, but that means that I am tired of talking, so bear with me as we continue with the Bosnians. And then down here you have some other nice units. Got some medium cavalry, and then again some early infantry and archers. So you start off with a decent amount of units. If you combined all your units, you would have a pretty good full stack army. But that could be problematic because you have potential enemies on all of your sides, which we'll talk about in a minute. As far as agents, you have a spy, a priest, a diplomat, and I believe an assassin. Yeah, you have an assassin down here. So pretty good. As far as your generals, King Tomas, he's okay, but he's got some potential. And then who is your prince? Faction heir down here. He's actually a pretty good bureaucrat, not terrible at running a city. So that's pretty nice. And then you have a few other generals if we look at them. This guy's loyalty is not great, and I believe it said that in the intro. So your realm is not divided, but the loyalty of some of your subjects is not the highest, so you have to watch out for that. Pilar here is a pretty good military commander here. He, in my campaign, which we'll see later, actually we won't because of a tragedy, but this was my dude. He conquered the world for me as the Bosnians, and then he died of the plague, so that was really annoying, but he is young and he is ready to take on the world, so a good general to have. And then down here, if we look at these guys, fairly decent, but their loyalty is definitely lacking. So be mindful of that. Be careful with them because they will likely rebel if you leave them wandering around for too long. So that's that. As far as special buildings, I believe it's really just your capital. You have the royal court, which gives you some nice bonuses here, as well as lets you train kind of your princesses and your Bosnian royal guard, which we'll talk about later. And this is where your diplomat comes from, even though you start with one. Yeah. So that's nice. And then the other thing is, if we look at the religion of your different regions. There are a lot of different religions in this game. You are a Catholic nation, but you'll notice that there is a much more prevalent faith, and that is the Bosnian church. And I believe it's called, it's like Christiani or something like that. There's actually not too much known about this heresy, other than it was very prevalent in Bosnia at this time. Now, you have come back to the fold, you are Catholic once again, but a lot of your regions are still quite loyal to this Bosnian church. So, what's interesting is you have the option to continue the legacy of building up Bosnian church buildings. If we look over here, I don't actually know how the building order works, but in two of your settlements, in here and then down in the coast, you actually start with a Christiani cemetery, which is kind of the low-tier level building for the heretical faith. And it does give you some pretty nice happiness bonuses if the heresy is believed enough. But for me, the benefits don't outweigh the cost. So what I would recommend is just destroying these cemeteries for a little extra money and just fully accepting Catholicism. There might be bonuses I don't know about, but I haven't really looked in the files too much to see that. So that's my recommendation there. If we look at our information over here, you can see that these are the regions we need to control to win the game. Diplomacy, I was right. You are at war with the Ottomans. Relations are terrible. The Serbians also hate you. And you're allied with the Hungarians, but you don't really have a too close of a relationship with them. So let us take off the fog of war. Oh, well, one more thing. So, with Bosnia, you have a lot of issues. There are a lot of problems, and one of them is money. This is one of the factions where money is quite an issue for a while in the early game. And one of the reasons for that is 4 of your 5 settlements are castles, and castles typically do not do as well financially than cities. So what I recommend is you really only need, I would say, 2 castles. Down here is nice because this is your southern realm and you're bordering quite a few enemy factions or possible enemies down here. So I would keep this castle. I would keep your capital city a castle just because it's the most developed. But up here, there's really no reason to have these as castles, I think. I would convert these to villages or cities, whatever it's called. Convert to towns just to make that little extra bonus cash. And it's the Hungarians border you to the north. They are your allies, so they're probably not going to move down here. Your northern borders are secure for the moment, so that is one thing I would recommend. But yeah, money is difficult for the Bosnians, especially in the early game. So let's turn this off for a second and look at your kind of starting position. It's not great. For expansion options, there are no rebel territories near you. If you want to expand, you're gonna have to fight some other factions. To the north, you have the Hungarians, who pretty powerfully border you, and thankfully you don't really have to worry about them early on in the game because they have their hands full elsewhere, and they are technically your allies, so they probably won't attack you. So that is nice to have. You don't really have to worry about the north. Now, the Principality of Sili, they do sometimes expand and take Hungarian regions, and my experience is if that happens, they will attack the Bosnians. So keep an eye on that, but for a while, you'll be safe, at least from the north. And similarly to the west, a lot of the Croatian lands are also held by the Hungarians, so you don't really have to worry about that. In fact, if you want to expand and you have the money, what might be nice is if you just purchase these settlements from the Hungarians, which I did in my campaign, which we will see later. To the south, along the Adriatic coast, we have up here in coastal Croatia, we have the Venetians, and they hold 2 settlements along with some unoccupied forts here. And they actually have quite a few good units in these settlements. And what they often do right away is march down to reach their other settlements down here in Montenegro and Albania. So you will have Venetian armies passing through your land quite a bit, and they might leave you alone. They usually do, but it's always kind of scary seeing elite Venetian troops marching through your settlements, crossing this bridge right next to your settlement. So yeah, be wary of that. What might be a good idea is hitting the Venetians first and taking this coast, which means you are pretty secure because the Hungarians border your north, your allies, and these are decently rich settlements. It's nice to have that Adriatic trade, so that could be an idea. And then further down, there are two more Venetian settlements, Scutari and Durazzo. So those are, if you go to war with the Venetians, just be aware that they have settlements on both of your sides on the Adriatic coast. Typically, they won't be going after you because their hands are full elsewhere too, but something to keep an eye on. To the east, we have your enemies, the Serbians. Now, talking about the Serbians is difficult because I would say in pretty much every regard they have better soldiers than you. They have a bigger territory than you. They have access to more wealth than you. But they're also in a worse position than you are, one of the few factions that is. So you do have to watch out for them. They will attack you, especially if you leave your capital city empty or low. They will attack you very quickly. They also start with quite a few units, and quite a few really good units too. So that can be problematic. But with the Serbians, not only are they at war with the Hungarians, and you can see Jano Sonyadi is right here with a huge army ready to move into Serbia and attack the Ottomans. So the Serbians and the Hungarians will be battling it out pretty much forever with this mod. So that's nice, is you have an ally against the Serbians. And then likewise, the Albanians usually attack Serbia, and the Ottomans will inevitably also attack Serbia. So the Serbians have their hands full. They will be fighting on all fronts, which could be good for you. You could move into western Serbia and take a few of these regions, which is kind of what I did. I took a few of their regions while they were busy elsewhere. But it was a tough fight because they were able to send some full armies against me pretty much right away. So you're going to have to watch out for the Serbians. And then, of course, the Serbians are your only buffer against the much more powerful Ottomans, who you start at war with, and they will inevitably come crashing into you at some point. If it's not in the early game, it will be in the later game, and the Ottomans are often relentless. So definitely watch out for them. I briefly mentioned the Albanians, and I would say the Albanians are probably your most obvious choice for an ally down here, because they are a Catholic faction, they are weak like you, and they have a lot of the same enemies as you. They will be fighting the Ottomans right away, and you are at war with the Ottomans. They often go to war with the Venetians, and like I said up here, you could take some Venetian lands. And then the Albanians and the Serbians often battle it out as well. So the enemy of my enemy is my friend, so the Albanians might be a nice ally to have. And then the only other neighbor I feel like I should talk about is the Republic of Ragusa. And with Ragusa, you really have two options. I would say you could ally with them right away and have a nice little bonus, a helpful friend to attack the Venetians and the Serbians, or take the Republic out. What makes this complicated is that you have the same allies. So they are allied with the Hungarians, meaning if you decide to go to war with Ragusa and you attack them first, Hungary will break their alliance with you, which means suddenly your entire northern border is vulnerable because the Hungarians will likely follow that end of the alliance with an invasion. So that makes things difficult. I would recommend either making an alliance with Ragusa right away. The problem with that is Ragusa is one of the best cities in this region, both lucratively as well as with recruitment. And if you're allied with them, you can't take that. So what I would do, what I did in my campaign, is I let Ragusa attack me first. I kind of left this unguarded enough to so that they were tempted by it, but I had enough soldiers that I was able to fight them off, and then I immediately moved my armies down there and wiped Ragusa out. And because they attacked me first, Hungary kept their alliance with me and broke it with Ragusa. But I would say that is probably your first question as Bosnia, is what to do with Ragusa. So that pretty much ends it up, or wraps this portion of the video up. Yeah, with the economy, Bosnia is going to struggle. There are some key settlements I would focus on, one being Ragusa. That's a pretty lucrative city. Any of the cities along the Adriatic coast are usually pretty good. Durazzo is very decent. And then another very rich settlement is Novo Brdo right here. It has some of the best mines in the game, and you can easily make well over 5,000 gold or whatever if you build this city up. The problem is obviously you do not start with this settlement, and it is right next to all the Ottomans. So watch out for that. Few other things is that these two settlements here are two of the best fortresses and citadels in the game, so that gives you some nice recruitment if you expand over here. Perhaps you could buy the settlement from the Hungarians. It really just kind of depends. But yeah, that is the Bosnian starting position. It's difficult, and you're going to have to make some pretty big decisions right away that will affect the rest of your game. So we'll talk about that later when we look at my campaign and what I did, but for now, let us jump over to the battle map. Alright, so here we are on the battle map for the Bosnian roster, and before we begin, the Bosnian roster is actually pretty interesting. I would say, if I had to put it in 3 words, it would be good, not great. The Bosnians are really... They're a jack of all trades, but a master of none in a way. They have excellent medium infantry and cavalry, but not the greatest heavy for either of those things. Now, they do have decent heavy infantry and heavy cavalry, but it's not as good as a lot of their neighbors. So you do have to be careful about that, but let's just get into this and you will see. So looking at the kind of your lowest tier unit is the Slavonic Peasant Spearmen, and I believe we covered them when I looked at the Serbian roster. They're available for anyone in the region, and they're just really garbage spearmen. Poor morale, good stamina, that's actually pretty surprising, but they get a bonus fighting cavalry because of the spear, but with a 1 attack and a 5 defense and poor morale, they're peasant infantry. They are taken from the fields and forced to fight for a ruler they probably hate and for a reason they probably don't agree with. But they are there. They're dirt cheap, of course. They're an area of recruitment unit. You can only get them in these regions. And they do have free upkeep because of their militia unit, their status, I mean. But other than that, I would avoid these guys whenever possible. Moving on to a slightly better unit, I guess, and that is Slavonic Axemen. And yeah, I would actually say they're a little bit better. They have a higher defense, total defense of 7, and an attack of 1, charge bonus of 1. That is just garbage, but it is effective against armor because it is an axe. And I do like the design of these units. I love the wooden shields, the fur, they look good. I mean, that's pretty much always the case with this mod, but again, I would not rely on these guys in the slightest. Now, they do have average morale, so they won't break as easily as these spearmen, but they're still peasant militia. They'll break pretty easily. Good stamina is pretty nice, but I would avoid these guys whenever I can. The only reason I got these guys in my campaign was I desperately needed as many soldiers as I could because the Republic of Ragusa attacked me kind of out of nowhere, and so I hired a few of these guys kind of as a support role, but don't rely on them to do much more than that. They do get free upkeep though, so that is nice, but And then I should say they're dirt cheap. I want to say their upkeep is like 66 florins or something like that. So for that amount of money, you know what, they're okay. But I would much rather have other units. I'm actually going to skip these guys and come back to them in a minute. Another militia tier unit you have, which I would recommend way over the Axemen or Spearmen, and that is the Slavonic Javelin Men. Now, their stats are pretty much identical. Total defense of 6, terrible. Melee attack of 1, terrible. Poor morale, terrible. Good stamina, sure, that's nice. But it's this missile attack of 9 that is actually pretty valuable, because that can take out a lot of even heavily armored soldiers. And because they're so cheap, again, it doesn't show here, but I want to say it's like a 66 upkeep or something like that. I really do like picking these Javelin Men up to hide behind my main lines and to pepper the enemy with javelins, because they can actually get a few kills. They do get free upkeep, which is nice. So of all the militia tier Slavic units, I would go with the Javelin Men because of that 9 missile attack. So, moving on, you also have access to Bosnian Macemen. Now, these are not peasant units, they are professional soldiers, but they're still kind of militia grade units. Quality average, yeah, I would agree with that. They do have good morale, which is nice. Combat bonus in woods, effective against armor, that's all good stuff. An attack of 2 is terrible. I mean, the only good thing is that it's effective against armor, so you might be able to take out some more armored troops with that. Total defense of 14, though, that's actually halfway decent for these guys, just because they are very cheap to recruit and upkeep. So they're a nice unit to have because you can recruit them from cities, I believe, not castles, and if you see an enemy army that caught you off guard and they're going to attack one of your cities and you just need to man the walls as desperately as possible, I wouldn't mind picking up a few of these guys. And you'll see in my campaign maybe later that I do have some of them kind of holding my frontiers as secondary reserve forces, just because they are very cheap. Their design is incredible. I really like how this unit looks, and they're a good support unit. I mean, they're not gonna win any medals or take any castles, but for a support role, for the price, not bad at all. Okay, so now let's move into your more professional tier military, and starting off with the Bosnian Spearmen. And this is just a very kind of run-of-the-mill average spear unit. I do like them quite a bit for their design alone. And yeah, they're average, I would say. Good morale is nice, can do shield trim, bonus fighting cavalry. An attack of 3 is pretty average for early tier spearmen. Total defense of 15, though, is okay. Like, these guys, again, they're far from the best in this mod, but they're okay. They'll do what their job is, which is hold the line a decent amount and to kill any cavalry, light cavalry, I would say, that dares to approach them. But other than that, I would not send these guys against any type of infantry because they will lose, but to hold the line against cavalry or until other infantry can support them, they're not half bad, and also they are very cheap. Now, what I would recommend is whenever you can, instead of using your Bosnian Spearmen, I would use your Pavis Spearmen, because these guys are an upgrade in pretty much every way over the Bosnian Spearmen. So if we look at the Bosnians, this is kind of what they have, and then look at the Pavis Spearmen, and it's an instant upgrade. Instead of good morale, we have excellent morale. Instead of a 3 attack, we have a 4 attack, and instead of a 15 defense, we have a 21 defense. And their 0 defense skill, I don't really understand that, but that's okay, because defense skill is the weakest, I would say, of the 3 different defenses. Shield is very nice. They obviously have this giant Pavis, which is great against missiles, and then armor of 11 doesn't hurt also. A little pricier than the Bosnian Spearmen, and they do take 3 turns to recruit, but they're much better than the Bosnian Spearmen in every regard. So in a way, they're similar units, just because they're not going to be the killing force of your army, they're going to be the hold the line force, and because of that, I do recruit both of them. But again, I would recommend getting the Pavis Spearmen whenever you can over the Bosnian Spearmen. And then we get to one of your feudal units, which is nice because you can recruit these guys anywhere you build the feudal buildings. And they are Bosnian swordsmen, and they're just, I would say they're good medium swordsmen. There's nothing too special about them. They're not a weak unit, but they're just average. And good morale is nice, but that's about it. A 4 attack for a sword is, I would say, actually a little below average. But then on the other side, I would say a 17 is a little above average for medium swordsmen. So again, that kind of just balances out to being an average unit. The thing they got going for them is that they're feudal, so they get free upkeep in settlements with those buildings, and they're cheap. So I do recruit these guys quite a bit because their design is great, which is one of the biggest things that decides whether or not I train units. But yeah, they're good. They're good, not great, like I said earlier. And because of that, I do recruit them, but they're not gonna blow you away with how they perform. I would highly recommend getting some experience on them and upgrading them if you get the Swordsmith Guild, so you can get that 4 up to a 5 or 6 or maybe even a 7, because then they're actually a pretty good unit. But that goes for any unit to a degree. Next, okay, so now we're going to get to your actual, your guys who are actually going to do some killing. And first of all, we have the Bosnian Halberdiers. And I'm actually quite a big fan of these guys because they're not incredible halberdiers. They can't form a spear wall, which is unfortunate. And they only have good morale, but everything else is pretty solid. Bonus fighting cavalry, effective against armor, that's all nice. Attack of 6, charge of 5 is pretty standard for halberds. And then a total defense of 15 is, again, I would say standard for an early halberd unit, maybe a little bit above average, but the thing that I like about them is, again, they're not too expensive. You don't have to feel guilty about training these guys, and they will do their job. They will definitely get their kills. They might lose a lot of men in the process, but they'll look good doing so, because look at these designs. I love it. And yeah, they can't form a spear wall, which kind of sucks, but it does mean that they can get that nice charge bonus of 5 in. Because sometimes with this game, if you have halberds that have the spear wall formation, they kind of glitch out when you try to charge them in. So having a halberd unit where they don't have that ability, it makes the charge much more easier to handle. So definitely a nice unit. I get these guys pretty much as often as I can because they will do work. And then an upgrade to them in a way, although I would say they have slightly different roles, are these guys. And we talked about them with Ragusa when I covered that faction, but the Oklapniki halberdiers or something like that. And these are professional halberdiers. They are excellent units, excellent morale, effective against armor, bonus fighting cavalry, all that good stuff. And these guys can form that spear wall, meaning they will be able to not only stop cavalry in their tracks, but really devastate enemy cavalry. An attack of 7 is quite good for halberds, total offense of 24. They are not the best halberdiers in the game, but they're very good. And I use these guys as my main line infantry with my Bosnian armies, especially in the later game, because they will hold the line. And with that plate armor, go back 24, 15 armor, that's pretty darn good. They will survive missile attacks, and they will survive in the melee as well. So I do recommend you get them. But what I like to do is have these guys as my main line, and then as a support role or a flank role, that's where my Bosnian swordsmen come in and my Bosnian halberdiers, because I like having these 3 units really provides a pretty decent infantry army. Now, it doesn't compare to the Serbians or the Hungarians or the Ottomans or the Venetians or really even Ragusa. They can all outmatch you with infantry. But the nice thing is you have access, for example, to 2 halberd units. So while they might only be able to train 1 halberd unit, you have 2 different types. Or similar with medium spearmen, you have 2 different types. So you can, in a way, be producing more troops to them. And obviously that's not the case against the Hungarians or the Ottomans. But it is a nice bonus for the Bosnians, and it's one of the reasons why I like this faction. Is it's really easy to muster several armies with a lot of units, and that's not always the case with some of the other factions. So that is one thing Bosnia has going for it. And then you also have an elite Bosnian unit, which is quite good, and that is the Bosnian Royal Guard. And these guys are superb, excellent swordsmen, and they inspire nearby troops, which is always good. Excellent morale, good stamina, meaning they will be able to fight for a while. They look pretty awesome. Their shields, breastplates, everything, and an attack of 7 is pretty good for swordsmen. Total defense of 29 is very nice. They are tanks. They will do well pretty much against any other infantry. There are only a few infantry that could really take them on, I would say. Well, no, there's more than a few, but as far as your neighbors go, there's only a few that can, I would say, beat the Bosnian Royal Guard, and they're a great support troop as well because of that inspiring nearby troops. Now, they are a little pricey to recruit, but they're actually not horrible to upkeep. I want to say it's 375, which is still a lot, don't get me wrong, but for an elite special unit, that's not terrible. The only problem is you can only recruit them in a couple different settlements, and I believe it's more than these 2. I want to say there's a 3rd or possibly even a 4th settlement that you can recruit them in. I believe the Serbian capital as well. But yeah, they are a little hard to get, but well worth it. And for example, I would put these guys as my front line. I would have my Bosnian Royal Guard behind them to lift the army's morale, keep everybody ready for the fight, and then engage as they may need it. And then on the flanks, I would have my Bosnian halberdiers and my Bosnian swordsmen to help support, with, of course, missile and cavalry units behind them. But we will talk about missile and cavalry units later. Just kidding, I lied. We'll talk about missile units right now. So the lowest, it's so late, the lowest missile unit you have are the Bosnian bowmen. And I appreciate how simple everything is labeled for the Bosnian units. You know, Bosnian spearmen, Bosnian swordsmen, Bosnian halberdiers, and Bosnian bowmen. Makes pronouncing easier for me. So these guys are just they're peasant units, and they're exactly kind of what you'd expect. Poor morale, good stamina, that's nice. Missile attack of 2, yeah, it can be useful, sure. Total defense of 5, anything and everything will kill them. They get free upkeep, sure. They are a unit, an area of recruitment unit in Bosnian regions, so you can only get them in a few settlements, but other than that, there's nothing really too special about them. They're very typical for peasant archers. And yeah, let's kind of move on. I'll recruit these guys maybe if I want a few more arrows in the air, but other than that, anytime I would recruit these guys over them. And that is the Bosnian medium archers, who, it says they're average. I really like using these guys for many reasons. First of all, I love their design, which again, that's a big factor in why I choose to get these guys. And they can lay stakes, which is really a powerful ability in this mod. This just decimates cavalry, or it prevents cavalry from charging into your units. So anytime a unit can lay stakes, that is a valuable unit. And other than that, yeah, no good stamina, no average morale. I mean, they're average archers in a lot of other regards. A melee attack of 3 is pretty average. Missile attack of 4 is average, or maybe even below average for archers. Total defense of 15, that's halfway decent. But it's the fact that they can lay stakes and they're very cheap that makes this unit quite valuable. And I do like to pair them with the next two units. So first of all, we have the aptly named Bosnian crossbowmen, who, yeah, quality, average. Again, they're not the best, but you just have access to so many different types of units. So yeah, they're not the best units, but you can produce a lot of them. So Bosnian crossbowmen, long-range missiles, that's great, and a missile attack of 9 can certainly do damage. Total defense of 16 is okay. I would say it's halfway decent. Melee attack of 3 is pretty bad. But again, it's very easy to recruit vast amounts of these guys. So if you lose a few of them, it doesn't matter because you got 2 more being produced for every 1 you lose. And then the direct upgrade to the Bosnian crossbowmen are the Pavis crossbowmen. Good morale, long-range missiles. They're just better in every regard. Even though their defense is lower, technically, I would say it's better defense spent. So they have, well, actually, the Bosnian crossbowmen have pretty good armor. So it's about the same there, but it's that missile attack of 10, which gives them a little bit of a bonus, and they're good morale. So, yeah, with Bosnia, you don't have the best missile units, but you have a lot of them. So it's very easy to get an army where you have plenty of bowmen and plenty of crossbowmen. And again, that is one of Bosnia's strength, is you can just mass produce a lot of types of different units. Even if they're not the best, you have a lot of them. And they're decently priced as well. Next up, we have a early gunner unit, and I enjoy how these guys function because they have both a Pavis and this hand gunner unit. So Pavis hook gunners, excuse me. Good morale, combat bonus in woods. They are superior. Just any gun unit is going to be superior in this game. Melee attack of 5 is okay. Total defense of 14 is okay. But a missile attack of 21, that is always going to be good. And that causes terror in the enemy. So I believe you start the game with 1 or 2 of these guys, and they can definitely do some damage, especially against the more heavy infantry of, say, Venice or the Ottomans. So a good unit. Again, they're outclassed by a lot of your neighbors' firearm units, but it's all you've got for the early part of the game until you can get mercenaries. So yeah, a good unit. I would recruit them whenever possible. They're also fairly cheap to upkeep. So certainly not a bad unit. And again, for a lot of Bosnian units, that's the thing, is they're not bad, they're not great, they're good. They're just kind of standard, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just something you have to be aware of. So that pretty much covers it for the Bosnian units, or infantry and missiles. I'll have to reload with the cavalry that are available to you. But I also wanted to showcase some of the other units you are able to recruit, and in particular the Croatian units. So the Croatian units are available to most factions who hold Croatian lands, but since you are the Bosnians and right next to Croatia, I'm going to showcase them now. One unit that is only available for the Bosnians, I believe, maybe the Hungarians as well, I'd have to check the files, are the Croatian men-at-arms. So you can actually recruit these guys right away from your capital, and they are similar to your Bosnian halberdiers, except they're, I would say, just a little bit better. They have a total defense of 16, 9 of that is armor, attack of 7, charge bonus of 5, so yeah, they are just a slight upgrade on your own halberdiers, and good morale, all the same bonuses. And again, that's the nice thing, is they're not amazing, but right off the bat, from turn number 1, you can recruit 2 halberd units, which other factions might only be able to recruit 1 from turn 1, where you have the ability to recruit 2. So I do like that amount, or that ability of Bosnia, and yeah, they're a really good looking unit. They'll definitely do some damage. A lot of two-handed units will die fairly easily just because they don't have that shield, but if you're able to catch enemy cavalry with these guys, they will not let you down. As far as other Croatian units, you have access to Croatian Spear Militia, which are just kind of an average militia unit. Attack of 2, charge bonus of 2, total defense of 12. That's all pretty standard. It's not great, but 8 of that is a shield, which is nice. They'll be able to hold the line for at least a little while, so you can get your other troops information or whatnot. And they have free upkeep, which is nice. And very similar to them in a way are your Croatian crossbow militia. Not a great unit. They're just a cheap militia crossbow unit. So 5 defense is terrible, 3 melee attack is nothing special, but a missile attack of 8, it can do damage. They're cheap, they have free upkeep, and that's pretty much all you can expect from them. And then another Croatian unit that I quite like are the Familiares Swordsmen. So we'll probably talk about these guys again when I cover Hungary and the the Kingdom of Sicily, or man, I'm all over the place. Whatever that faction is, I don't remember exactly what it's called. The Kingdom of Sicily, I believe. Anyway, and that is these swordsmen, and they are a Croatian unit, and they're pretty decent. If you compare them to your own swordsmen, they're a lot better in every way, pretty much. Good morale. Total offense of 19 is good. Attack of 6 is good. Again, good, not great. I believe they're only recruitable in Croatian and Slovenian regions, and they do get free upkeep, which is nice. They're not too expensive, and they look pretty good. They look really good, actually, but yeah, nothing too crazy, but a nice unit to have available. And then another unit I wanted to talk about, they're not Croatian, but that is the Hajduks, something like that. And that is basically Serbians or other Slavic Christian peoples who have fled the Balkans away from the Ottomans and are now fighting as mercenaries. And they are locked behind a scripted event, so you cannot recruit them right away. But once you do, they're quite useful. A 10 defense is not great, especially 6 of that being a defense skill, meaning anything and any type of missile fire will kill them. But a missile attack of 11 is pretty good for crossbow units, especially since it's long range. They also have very good stamina, which is extremely rare in this mod, so that is something to note. Good morale, all these bonuses about hiding and whatnot, and then they can lay stakes. So definitely a nice unit to pick up. I wouldn't rely on them as my main missile unit, but if I had an army that needed a few more, I would definitely recruit these guys, and they're fairly cheap as well. So they are recruitable all throughout the Balkans after a certain event, and yeah, a nice unit to have. Okay, so let me get the Bosnian cavalry. Alright, so let's take a look at the Bosnian cavalry, and again, to sum them up, I would say good, not great. So, starting off with the Bosnian bodyguard, these guys are actually pretty great. I mean, quality exceptional, powerful charge, inspires nearby troops, that's all pretty normal. Charge bonus of 14 is pretty good. I mean, that will kill any infantry pretty much. And a total defense of 33 is definitely very good. Now, some of your neighbors might have cavalry with a higher defense than that, but once you're in the mid to upper 30s, it qualifies you as a tank in my mind, and these guys definitely fit the bill. So they will typically not let you down. And then as far as their secondary weapon, they have a sword with an attack of 10. So they will definitely be able to do a lot of killing in the hand-to-hand combat. And other than that, yeah, a great unit. I don't have too much more to say about them. And then we have another interesting unit, and that is we have Serbian horsemen, which is Serbians living in Bosnian land who are fighting for the Bosnians, which is actually pretty interesting. And they are an okay light cavalry unit, I would say, or an okay medium cavalry unit. Total offense of 13 is not great. Charge bonus of 11 will get the job done, but it's not wonderful. But they are cheap, and unfortunately they're only recruitable in Bosnian regions. But as a nice little support cavalry unit, they're not half bad. And as for their secondary, what's interesting is they have maces. So it only has an attack of 3, but it is armor piercing. So if you charge them into a more heavily cavalry or a more heavily armored cavalry unit, there we go, they might actually do some damage with those maces, which is very nice. And then moving on, you have another kind of medium cavalry unit, and that is the Bosnian cavalry. And these guys are definitely better than the Serbian horsemen. Good stamina, that's awesome. Powerful charge, excellent morale. All that is really nice. Yeah, I would say they are definitely superior medium cavalry. Attack of 3, charge bonus of 11, which is about the same. Yeah, it is the same. And total defense of 15. So that's all solid for medium cav. They will die to any type of heavy cavalry, but all of that is fairly decent, and they're also pretty cheap to obtain as well. Which you'll notice this pattern with Bosnian units is, again, they're good, not great, but they're easy to recruit, and they're cheap. So you can maintain and build armies very easily. And that is Bosnia's main strength, I would say. As far as these guys, their secondary is a sword with an attack of 7, which is, that's pretty good actually for a secondary sword attack for cavalry. But I would much rather, instead of these guys, have the Laka Konichka Lancers or something along those lines. They're very similar. They have pretty much the same stats, but one or two differences. So excellent morale, powerful charge, good stamina. That is all pretty similar. They do have a better charge, though, of 15 rather than 11. Total defense is 14 instead of 15, so about the same. But these guys also have a mace as their secondary. So they have an attack of a 4 with their mace, which is pretty low, but it is armor piercing. So that kind of makes them a wild card in that they can do damage against units that are much more heavily armored than them. And I really like these 3 units. They're medium cavalry. They're not going to do anything too crazy, but the thing is, you can recruit, just from your capital alone, you can recruit 2 of each of these units, and that means within 2 turns, you can have 6 units of excellent medium cavalry. So again, with Bosnia, you can recruit a lot of soldiers really quickly, and for that reason, I really like these guys. And it's kind of your play style. Would you rather have 1 unit of heavy cavalry that's expensive to maintain, or 2 or 3 halfway decent medium cavalry units? It depends on how I'm feeling, but the Bosnian playstyle is definitely fun. And then you do have access to some heavy cavalry. Again, it's not going to quite compare with the heavy cavalry of your neighbors, but it will get the job done. So you have the Vlastela noble cavalry or something along those lines. And these are your nobles in full plate armor, as you can see here. They look great. I love this designed like winged shield. Really love this unit. Powerful charge, may charge without orders. That's not really a problem for me typically. I don't think that plays out too well with Medieval 2, so I wouldn't worry about that. Excellent morale, inspires nearby troops is really nice. These men are elite. Attack of 6, charge bonus of 18 means they will crush infantry or cavalry that they charge into. And again, a total defense of 28. It's not as high as your bodyguard. It's not as high as other heavy cavalry, but it's still pretty good. And they are feudal, so they get free upkeep in the appropriate settlements. They are expensive, $11.75 to recruit, and I believe they're 500 or 600 to maintain. But that's pretty standard for heavy noble cavalry. And as far as their secondary goes, they have a sword with an attack of 11, which is very good. So they can definitely hold their own in the hand-to-hand. And then finally, we have another Croatian unit, so you can only recruit these guys in Croatian provinces, and that is the Croatian Bandirium. And this is another excellent heavy cavalry. I believe they are better than your nobles. I mean, this is a more Western-styled area. The Croatians were typically more Western than the Bosnians with their warfare styles, so that is to be expected. And just look at these guys. I really I really enjoy the designs. Let's look at their stats. Excellent morale, powerful charge, may charge without orders. So they don't inspire the troops, but they are elite, they're feudal, so you can get free upkeep, which is nice. Charge bonus of 18 is great. Defense of 30 is really nice. They have slightly better armor than their Bosnian counterparts. And for their secondary, they too have a sword with an attack of 11. So very solid heavy cavalry. Again, it's not the best in the game, but it will service you quite well. And if you have your heavy cavalry with ample support from your medium cavalry, you can take on the best cavalry in the game. So it's really just how you play with the Bosnians. So that's about it. There obviously are other units you can recruit as the Bosnians, but I would say that is probably the core of what you're going to be using. So now let's quickly look at my most recent Bosnian campaign. Alright, so here we are back on the campaign map for my most recent campaign as the Bosnians. It is currently 1467 AD, I'm at turn 79, and I control the 30 regions that I need. Well, I need 35 and I control 30, so I still need a few more to win, but at this point I knew that I was on the verge of victory. So, yeah, let's take a look at my diplomacy. I'm actually not at war with anybody. You can see my allies. I have maintained my alliance with the Hungarians. You can see that I am paying them quite a bit of money because I have bought a few settlements from them. But they have actually maintained their alliance with me for a long time. So they've been nice allies to have. I'm also allies with the Genoese and the Papal States, as well as the Kingdom of Sicily. So I've got some nice Italian support across the Adriatic, which is nice. And then I'm also allied with the Swiss, because why not? As far as enemies, I don't have any at the moment. I've been at war with, well, let's take a look. So again, if we look at our capital city here, you can see it's not fully ready, but you can just recruit so many different types of units. So if you want spearmen, you can get spearmen. If you want halberdiers, you can get halberdiers. Again, with the same with cavalry, the same with missile units. So the fact that you can just in this one settlement recruit so many units so easily is really a strength for Bosnia. And that's definitely a nice aspect. So in my campaign, I think I talked a little bit about it, but oh, and you can see up here, I've turned both of these settlements into cities, so they're making quite a bit more money than they would otherwise. So the first thing I did is I combined all of my units I could, and I marched into Serbia. I did leave some units back here to protect against Ragusa in case they attacked me, which they did. But the first thing I did was I hit Serbia first. I took this settlement right here, and then I fought off the full stack army that Serbia sent to counter me. So with that, I was actually content for the time being. I stopped my push into Serbia. That was enough for me. So I left behind a garrison that could defend itself, and by this point, Ragusa had attacked me, so I sent everything I had down here, and I wiped Ragusa out pretty quickly in the campaign. And you can also see here that these cities on the Adriatic make a lot of money, so definitely something to think about when you're crying about the Bosnian economy, because the Bosnian economy is not the greatest, and you can build it up. There are some nice mining resources here, but it takes a little bit of work to get there. So after this, what I did is I went up the coast and I took out the Venetians to take these two settlements, and then similarly I moved down the coast to take Scutari or Skadar from the Venetians, as well as this settlement from the Serbians. So I then had control of most of the Adriatic coast, which was nice. And at that point, the Pope was quite angry with me because I was fighting fellow Catholics, so I said, okay, fine, I will refocus on the Serbians. So that's what I did, and I pushed the Serbians to the east while the Ottomans were pushing from the west, and we wiped them out. So I was not allied to the Ottomans. In fact, we regularly fought, but we did wipe out the Serbians. So now I am all the way up to the Danube, up to Wallachia, and the Wallachians and I have had pretty good relations this whole time. But right now, I've formed this defensive line against the Ottomans because they have regularly attacked me, and I'm not too interested right now in moving more into the Balkans because it's a lot of work. I mean, you can see the Ottomans just have full stack armies just walking around here. There's so many soldiers. I don't really want to deal with that. I might take Thessalonica just because it's such an important city, but it might not be worth it. So after that, yeah, I did push the Ottomans back a little bit. I took this settlement as well as Vidin up here. And you can see if we take a look at my units here, I'm focusing on the defensive. So got a lot of crossbowmen, a lot of okay infantry, nothing too special here. Moving down over here, I've got some good infantry, some okay infantry, and some Bulgarian archers, which are pretty nice. They're a good unit. So nothing too special there, but over here with these recruitment centers, I could recruit armies to reinforce should I need it.
There are no rules in battle for a true warrior.
Okay, thank you for that. And down over here I have, I would say, better units, especially these Bosnian Royal Guards. And then over here, yes, crossbowmen, archers, even a wagon fort. I'm excited to cover these guys when we talk about Bohemia. So that's, I pushed the Ottomans back, secured my borders, we made peace. I want to say they offered to pay me money for that peace, which I accepted, and then I focused on my northwest. So it was a nice campaign because I really was able to avoid a two-front war. Once my southern border was secure, I moved more into Croatia and Slovenia and Austria. So I bought these two settlements from my allies, the Hungarians, and you can see I've got some nice Hungarian units, or I'm sorry, Croatian units, just kind of occupying and making sure nothing's going to go wrong over there. And then I wiped out Sili up here. I took Zagreb. I've got a nice little force up here, some axemen, crossbows, just kind of standard militia units just to hold the line in case the Austrians or the Venetians get any ideas up here. We destroyed Sili as a faction, me and the Hungarians, and then I bought this settlement from the Hungarians, and I bought this settlement from the Hungarians, and I bought this one, and I bought this one, and so it's about 7 settlements that I just ended up buying from the Hungarians because I had money at this point and they did not, and they were happy to oblige me. But I have noticed that, as is often the case with this mod, the Wallachians have grown very strong. They have pushed into the Hungarian plains and are just kind of wiping out the Hungarians. And, oh, it looks like the Poles have as well. The Poles have moved south. So I'm sending some reinforcements just up to my northern border, just in case anyone wants to cross the Danube. But I think by that point in time, the campaign will be pretty much done. So I also pushed the Venetians back at this point because we were at war again. And I have, again, not a crazy amazing force. This is actually not too strong at all. But it would be enough to hold for a little while if the Venetians or Austrians attack me. And the Venetians have actually been, I want to say they're still excommunicated. Yeah, they are. So I called a crusade on them just to keep them busy with other factions. I wasn't too interested in pushing into Italy. I did move down and take Venice, and it's barely defended with some militia units. But that's a really nice settlement to have, obviously. It's over 7,000 income. And the papacy is over here. Italy is just a mess, as it often is in this mod. There's all sorts of factions in here. And that's keeping the Venetians busy. So with that, we made a peace treaty. They gave me this little peninsula in response. And that kind of ended my northern campaign. So at this point, I had 30 regions, and I was thinking, I'm not really at war with anybody. I'm in a good spot financially. I mean, I am paying a pretty hefty tribute to the Hungarians, but things are looking pretty good. So what should I do? And I decided, I should unite the Yugoslavic people, if you will, once and for all, and take out the Albanians. Now, the Albanians have been my ally for a long time. We're neutral at this point in time, but right now, I believe it's time. So they do have a lot of forces, but I'm sending 3 armies at them, and I have more reinforcements on the way. So even though Skanderbeg is up here, oh no, it's not Skanderbeg. He must have died. So I'm sure they have some good units in here. But if we look at some of my armies, these are elite veterans of many of my campaigns, and I've got mercenary units, mercenary Serbians and Hussites, as well as my more traditional Bosnian units. So that is definitely a formidable force. Not a great commander. I actually got really unlucky with my commanders in this campaign. I had one, I think I mentioned earlier, who was amazing, and then he got the plague and died, and that's just how the medieval world is, I suppose. But so I'm trying to build up some of these other guys, turn them into commanders, but he's going to invade from the east, and then I have an army over here, and this is where a lot of my elite cavalry is. You can see these guys have quite a bit of experience, as well as your standard halberd and missile units. So that's pretty good. He's not a great commander at all, but I'm hoping to get him there. And then I have an amphibious assault down here as well, aiming to take Durazzo and flank the Albanians. This force is not quite as good, but it's got some nice unit. I have some Serbian hussars and a lot of Venetian archers, which I trained, which is nice. So I'm thinking with those 3 armies, I will be able to take most of the Albanian land and then hold against their counterattacks and eventually wipe them out. So I only need 5 more regions. I will take their 4 settlements and then maybe 1 more Ottoman settlement, and that should be the end of the game. So overall, a little bit of a difficult campaign, especially in the beginning because your economy is so terrible. In fact, let's look at how, just up and down for finances with the Bosnians. Right for the first 20 turns, you're suffering quite a bit, and I think this is when I went to war with the Ottomans, and then this is when I started buying things from the Hungarians. So yeah, money is pretty tight, and then on top of that, you have to be really careful with who and where you attack. So other than that, the Bosnians are definitely up there as one of my favorite factions. I just love this area of the map. There's always a lot going on, and again, they're an interesting playstyle because you don't have better units than your neighbors, so you have to adapt to that and possibly recruit more than they do, or supplement with mercenaries, things like that. So other than that, let's just see if anything odd is happening in the world. The Ottomans still haven't pushed into Greece completely, but they are moving up into Moldova. They've taken most of Anatolia. The Hospitallers have taken all the Aegean Islands, which I thought was kind of interesting. Italy is a hot mess. There's like 7 factions right in here, which I'm more than happy about. That'll keep the Venetians off my back for now. Germany is also a hot mess, which is pretty typical. And the Polish are actually doing really well. They've moved into Hungary, as well as Moldova. The Wallachians, like I said, are doing very well, very powerful. So yeah, kind of a standard game in a lot of ways. That's typically, a lot of those things do tend to happen. But yeah, I greatly enjoyed my Bosnian campaign. Oh, the other thing I would say is King Stefan Tomas the Killer. Your assassin that you start with is actually fairly good, and I've used him quite a bit. He's actually quite good now. And the first thing I did with him is Ragusa starts with a couple merchants. I killed their merchants in like turns 2 and 3 because it was easy, it keeps them from getting that extra amount of money, and it leveled up my assassin. So that was nice. But other than that, I think that about wraps it up for the Bosnians. Definitely give them a try because they are an enjoyable faction. Just be careful. So anyway, that's that. Next time, I'm going to be covering one of the Islamic factions, I believe. I'm not going to tell you which one for now, but that should be interesting. And that's about it. The only other thing I would say is that if you enjoy 13th, 14th, and 15th century medieval history, I have a podcast on Amir Timur, or Tamerlane, and we cover his life, conquests, character, legacy, and more. It's called the Timur Podcast, and information on that is in the description below. Right now, we're in the 1380s, covering his invasions of Persia and Afghanistan. So check that out if you're interested. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.